It was supposed to be a routine bank visit. 10 minutes, maybe 15, tops. Vanessa Rhodes had done this kind of thing countless times before. Sign some documents, confirm her identity, shake a few hands, and move on with her day. But that particular morning would unfold into something no one saw coming, something that would shatter the foundations of a billion-dollar partnership and ignite a storm of conversations across the corporate world. Vanessa was no ordinary executive. She was the CEO of Quantum Apex, a black woman who had carved her empire out of sweat, brilliance, and relentless perseverance. Her face had graced business magazines, her keynote speeches had moved audiences around the globe, and her company was on the verge of a $2 billion international expansion. This was the final step, one visit to the downtown San Francisco branch of a major bank to verify identity before closing the deal. She walked in confidently, dressed in a crisp, black tailored suit, the click of her heels echoing against the marble floor, her executive assistant, Jamie, trailing just behind her with a tablet full of digital forms. Vanessa carried a leather briefcase, the kind executives don't carry unless they've earned it. She approached the teller window with composure, handed over her government-issued ID, and waited, expecting nothing more than a polite confirmation and a signature. Instead, silence. The teller took the ID and glanced at it with narrowed eyes, her expression unreadable at first, then shifting into something unmistakable. Suspicion. No smile, no welcome. Just a scoff. And then, without saying a word, the teller let the ID slide from her hand. It didn't fall accidentally. She didn't place it on the counter gently like professionals are trained to do. No, the ID fell. Intentionally, casually, as though it meant nothing. It hit the tile floor with a cold click, face down. Time froze for a moment. Jamie, who had been reviewing the last few forms, looked up in disbelief. "Did she just—" she began, but Vanessa was already bending down to pick it up, still calm, still composed. But the tension in the air shifted like a storm cloud rolling in. Vanessa looked up slowly and asked, "Excuse me, is there a problem?" The teller crossed her arms. "We've had a lot of fake IDs lately," she replied flatly. Then came the words that sliced through the room like a blade. "You people always try this." Jamie's eyes widened. "She's the CEO of Quantum Apex," she said quickly, her voice shaking between outrage and shock. "This has all been pre-cleared. The investment firm already sent the documents. The deal is closing today." But the teller smirked, unmoved. "Anyone can say they're a CEO." Her tone was laced with a skepticism that wasn't just about protocol, it was personal. Behind them, a small line was forming. A few customers looked on, sensing something was wrong. The branch manager was nowhere to be seen. Vanessa didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She just reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and asked evenly, "Can I speak to your branch manager, please?" The teller rolled her eyes. "They're busy. You can come back later." Jamie leaned in. "Do you want to leave? I can call the investor's office. Reschedule." But Vanessa shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "We finish this. Just not here." What happened next didn't unfold in the bank. It exploded online. Jamie, still disturbed by what she had witnessed, wrote a LinkedIn post that night. She described the entire event, without naming the bank, without exposing identities. But the details were enough. Enough for the story to spread. Enough for it to reach the upper levels of the financial institution, and enough for the investment partners who had been watching closely to reconsider everything. Within 48 hours, the mood shifted. The international firm that had been preparing to wire funds paused their actions. The legal team froze final contract reviews. A short, vague message was sent. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, we are reevaluating the timeline." The bank's corporate division issued a templated apology, bland and sterile. Not a word about the teller, not a word about the racial undertones. No public acknowledgement, no accountability, just silence. But the damage had already been done. 18 months of deal-making, flying between time zones, building bridges between global stakeholders, gone. The $2 billion deal collapsed without fanfare, and the world learned a painful truth that Black professionals know all too well. Even when you make it to the top, They will still question if you belong there. The irony? That teller had no idea who she had disrespected. Vanessa Rhodes wasn't just another customer. She was the woman who had built her empire from nothing, who had coded her company's first platform herself, pitched to dozens of investors who doubted her, and scaled Quantum Apex to protect the digital infrastructure of thousands of schools and hospitals. She had spoken on panels about innovation. She had been recognized at the White House. And yet to that one bank employee, she was just another you people. But Vanessa didn't go on a media tour. She didn't sue. She didn't rant. She didn't call the bank's CEO or threaten legal action. Instead, she posted just one message on Quantum Apex's official LinkedIn page. Some things don't need a microphone, they need a mirror. And that was it. The post went viral overnight. Millions of impressions. Thousands of comments from CEOs, activists, professionals, and everyday citizens. It sparked intense debate. It forced companies to look inward. Some praised her dignity, others raged on her behalf. But Vanessa said nothing more, because in her silence, she had said everything. And perhaps that's what made the story so powerful. Not just the humiliation she endured, but the grace with which she responded. No shouting, no revenge, just clarity. And the cold, hard truth of how easily even billion-dollar partnerships can be unraveled. Not by a failed negotiation, not by a market crash, but by a moment of prejudice at a bank counter. A moment so small it could have been missed, but so loud it echoed through industries. This wasn't just about an ID, it was about respect. It was about representation. And it was a reminder that no matter how high you climb, some will still see only the color of your skin. But when they try to throw your identity on the floor, you pick it up, look them in the eye, and make sure the world sees what they did. Vanessa's assistant, Jamie, stood frozen. The moment the ID hit the floor, something inside her jolted. She had worked with Vanessa Rhodes for nearly 2 years, followed her through tech expos, late-night investor meetings, global Zoom calls with CEOs who wore Rolexes, and gave side smirks until Vanessa outnegotiated them all. Jamie had seen Vanessa stand toe-to-toe with billionaires. But this moment inside a local bank branch, this was different. The quiet insult, the dismissive body language, the cold indifference, it felt designed to humiliate. She blinked, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Vanessa, on the other hand, remained poised. With deliberate calm, she bent down, picked up her government-issued ID, wiped off a tiny speck of dust, and looked the teller in the eyes. "Excuse me," she said clearly, voice neither loud nor aggressive, just dignified. "Is there a problem?" Her tone carried the weight of someone who had been through worse and survived it all. But instead of softening, the teller's posture hardened. She crossed her arms, eyes narrowed, and with a shrug that seemed rehearsed, said, "We've had issues with fake IDs lately. You people always try this." The words hit Jamie like a slap. You people. 2 words, but they carried centuries of assumptions, biases, and disrespect. Vanessa's eyebrows didn't rise. Her lips didn't tighten. She just held the teller's gaze in a way that made the room feel heavier. Jamie couldn't stay silent anymore. "She's the CEO of Quantum Apex," she said, stepping slightly forward. Her voice shook, not from fear, but disbelief. "This account has already been verified. The paperwork was submitted 3 days ago. The documents were cleared through your corporate office. We're here to finalize the last step of a $2 billion international partnership. This is not how you treat a client, much less a CEO," but the teller, far from apologetic, let out a small, smug smirk. "Anyone can say they're a CEO," she said, tilting her head like she'd just been handed a prank ID at a nightclub. Her tone was casual, dismissive, the kind people use when they've already made up their minds. The implication wasn't just that the ID might be fake. It was that Vanessa herself couldn't possibly be who she claimed to be. Not a black woman, not in that bank, not with that level of power. Behind them, the line began to grow. A few people in the queue shifted uncomfortably. One woman whispered something to her husband. A man in a suit frowned at the commotion. But no one said anything. Not a single customer stepped forward to intervene. Vanessa glanced over her shoulder briefly, then returned her attention to the teller. No anger, no raised voice, just clarity. She reached into her bag and took out her phone. With steady hands, she opened the voice recorder app and tapped the red button. "Can I speak with your branch manager, please?" she asked, this time slightly louder, ensuring her voice was picked up. The teller, seeing the phone, looked mildly startled, but then rolled her eyes dramatically and leaned on the counter. "They're busy," she said with a sigh, as though she were dealing with a minor annoyance. "You can come back later." She shrugged again. Shrugging seemed to be her favorite move. Jamie felt a pulse of heat rush to her cheeks. This wasn't just unprofessional, it was openly hostile. She leaned toward Vanessa and whispered, "We should leave. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I can call the investors' liaison and tell them we'll reschedule." But Vanessa didn't flinch. "No," she said firmly, her voice low and even. "We finish this, but not here." Her words were controlled, not out of fear, but out of principle. She wasn't going to let someone else's ignorance derail her day, her deal, or her dignity. She wasn't going to make a scene for someone else's entertainment. She understood something deeply. When you are a Black woman in power, people will test you, not in conference rooms, but in places like this. They'll test your patience, your grace, your restraint. And if you lose control, you become the story. Jamie nodded slowly, realizing the weight of what had just happened. This wasn't about an ID. It wasn't about policy. It wasn't about identity verification. This was about perception. The idea that someone like Vanessa couldn't possibly belong in this space, couldn't possibly be trusted, couldn't possibly be real. Jamie followed quietly as Vanessa turned and walked toward the exit. The branch grew quieter as they passed. People watched but said nothing. Outside, the California sun hit their faces. Vanessa paused on the sidewalk, took a breath, and finally looked at Jamie. "Let's call the partners," she said. "We'll have them send a mobile notary to our office. We're not stepping foot back in there." Jamie nodded. "I'll handle it." As they waited for the car, Jamie looked over at her boss, still composed, still graceful, and realized she had just witnessed something far more powerful than a confrontation. She had seen leadership in its rawest form. Vanessa hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't demanded attention, but she had exposed something ugly without ever breaking character. And the world would find out about it soon. Because what started as one bank visit was about to ripple across boardrooms, headlines, and timelines. And all it took was a teller who thought throwing an ID on the floor would go unnoticed. By the following morning, the internet was already on fire. Without naming names or pointing fingers, Jamie had posted a detailed account of what happened at the bank. She didn't include the name of the teller, the branch, or even the bank itself. But the story was too specific, too vivid, and too familiar for the world to ignore. The tone of the post was calm, almost surgical, but the implication was crystal clear. A Black woman CEO on the brink of closing a multi-billion-dollar international deal had been dismissed and disrespected in a public space, not with overt slurs, but with something more insidious: everyday bias. Jamie didn't write the post to go viral. She wrote it out of frustration, out of disbelief, out of the need to document something she couldn't unsee. Within hours, the post had thousands of shares, hundreds of comments from professionals across industries, and reactions from people in tech, finance, and DEI spaces. Some readers expressed outrage. Others shared similar experiences. A few even attempted to dismiss the story, calling it exaggerated or taken out of context. But the overwhelming majority saw it for what it was: a mirror held up to corporate America's quiet prejudice. By mid-afternoon, someone had connected the dots. The identity of the bank wasn't officially revealed, but industry insiders knew which firm Quantum Apex had been working with. Screenshots circulated, speculation turned into certainty, and the bank's executive leadership team suddenly found themselves in crisis mode. Inside the skyscraper headquarters of that very bank, conference calls were being made in hushed voices, PR consultants were looped in, legal departments combed through Jamie's post for anything actionable. But there was none. She hadn't broken any rules. She hadn't even named them. And that's what made the damage worse. It wasn't a lawsuit or a smear campaign. It was just the truth. And the truth had begun to spread like wildfire. The international investment group that had been partnering with Quantum Apex, an influential firm based in Singapore, caught wind of the situation almost immediately. Their regional advisor forwarded the post along with a short note. Is this true? Within 24 hours, Quantum Apex received a politely worded email from the firm's legal counsel. Due to unforeseen reputational considerations, we are temporarily halting the finalization of all ongoing negotiations. No phone call, no explanation beyond that. Just a wall of legalese shielding them from involvement. It was a gut punch. The deal had been 18 months in the making. Hours of flights, months of drafting, years of proof of concept development. Vanessa had built this from the ground up, and now it was unraveling, not because of a failed pitch, but because someone at a teller window couldn't see beyond her own prejudice. The bank sent a generic email to Quantum Apex's office. It was less than 2 paragraphs. It used the words regret and experience, but never mentioned Vanessa by name. It didn't acknowledge what had happened. It didn't say sorry. It simply read like a formality, like they were checking a box. There was no press release, no apology from the teller, no internal investigation that was made public. Just nothing. And so, just like that, the $2 billion deal collapsed. Quietly, without a headline or official obituary. There was no boardroom debate, no dramatic walkouts, no televised reckoning. It didn't end with fire. It ended with silence. But that silence was deafening. Everyone in the industry felt it. Founders whispered about it in private Slack channels. DEI consultants forwarded Jamie's post during corporate training sessions. Venture capitalists began asking uncomfortable questions during pitch meetings. The fallout wasn't limited to that one bank. It became a cautionary tale across the ecosystem. People understood now that deals could fall apart, not because of a flawed business model or a missed deadline, but because of a single moment of disrespect. One moment of unchecked bias. One moment when someone forgot that the person standing in front of them was not just another client, but the architect of a billion-dollar vision. And through it all, Vanessa remained composed. She didn't respond to media requests. She didn't release a statement. She didn't go on a talk show or tweet a thread. She let the silence speak for itself, because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of accountability. No press conference. No justice. Just an ID dropped on the floor. And trust lost forever. What the teller didn't know that day, what she couldn't possibly have grasped in that brief, condescending interaction, was the magnitude of the woman standing in front of her. Vanessa Rhodes wasn't just another customer walking in with paperwork. She was the embodiment of a story rarely told, but deeply lived. Born and raised in the heart of Detroit, Vanessa came from a world the teller likely never imagined, one shaped by struggle, resilience, and grit. Her mother, a tireless force of nature, worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. There were days when Vanessa did homework by candlelight, not because it was romantic, but because the electricity had been shut off. But still, her mother always told her she was meant for more. And Vanessa believed it. She poured herself into school, absorbing knowledge like oxygen. When other kids were watching cartoons, she was at the public library reading about computers, fascinated by the logic and possibility of code. That drive earned her a full scholarship to a top university where she majored in computer science and graduated at the top of her class. One of the only Black women in her cohort. She had offers from big tech firms waiting for her the day she graduated, but she turned them down. Why? Because Vanessa didn't just want to work for someone else's vision. She wanted to build her own. She scraped together $5,000 from freelance gigs and small grants and used it to launch Quantum Apex from the corner of her tiny apartment, driven by one mission: to develop cybersecurity tools for underserved institutions, public schools, community hospitals, and nonprofits, organizations that were always left behind by big tech. Over the years, Quantum Apex grew from a one-woman operation into a powerhouse firm serving clients in over 22 countries. Vanessa built a team that reflected the communities they served. Diverse, passionate, purpose-driven. She didn't just chase profit, she chased impact. And people noticed. She was profiled in Forbes, honored in Inc. magazine's Top Founders Under 40, interviewed by Bloomberg about women in tech, and eventually invited to speak at the White House about digital equity. Her voice carried weight in spaces where few Black women had ever been invited. She mentored young Black coders. She funded scholarships. She became a beacon for what was possible when talent met opportunity. But in that bank, on that day, none of that mattered. Not the degrees, not the accolades, not the millions of users protected by her firm's software, not the $2 billion international partnership waiting to be finalized. Because in that moment, to that one teller, all of Vanessa's achievements were invisible. She wasn't seen as a CEO or a visionary or even a valued customer. She was seen through a filter of suspicion, a threat, a problem. A woman whose ID was worth throwing on the floor. A Black woman who had to be put in her place. And that's what hurt the most, not just for Vanessa, but for everyone watching. Because Vanessa's story wasn't just hers. It echoed the lived reality of countless Black professionals who have risen to the top, only to be questioned, doubted, dismissed, or humiliated in the most ordinary places. LinkedIn lit up with reactions from doctors, lawyers, engineers, CFOs, all with stories of their own. Stories of being mistaken for assistants, stories of being asked to wait in lobbies they owned, stories of handing over business cards only to be laughed at. And while none of them were surprised by what happened to Vanessa, all of them felt the sting, because it reminded them that no matter how many degrees they earned, how many awards they received, or how many empires they built, there would always be someone ready to reduce them to a stereotype, someone who would drop their ID on the floor without a second thought. And it raised a question that echoed louder than any headline. When is enough truly enough? How high do Black professionals have to climb to finally be treated with basic respect? For Vanessa, the bank visit was just one moment in a long journey, but it was a defining one, because it revealed that the real challenge isn't just building a business, it's navigating a world that still refuses to see you clearly. And that's why her silence afterward was so powerful. She didn't respond with rage or a media blitz. She didn't retaliate with lawsuits or online shaming. She posted one quiet sentence: "Some things don't need a microphone, they need a mirror." And in doing so, she forced the world to look at itself, not just at the teller, but at the system, at the assumptions, at the quiet, everyday moments where respect is given or withheld, not based on merit, but on appearance. And in that mirror, the world saw something it could no longer deny. A week had passed, but the firestorm hadn't died down. In fact, it had grown stronger, louder, and far more public. Reporters had begun circling like vultures, each one desperate to get the exclusive scoop. Talk show hosts sent personal invitations. Top-tier podcasts promised entire episodes dedicated to Vanessa's story. Business magazines dangled front-page features. Journalists camped out near the Quantum Apex headquarters hoping for a comment. Everyone wanted her voice, her version, her face on the headline. It wasn't just about the bank incident anymore. It had become a symbol, a cultural flashpoint. But Vanessa, she said nothing. No press release, no live stream, no exclusive interviews, just complete silence. Her team shielded her, declining all media inquiries with the same line: "Ms. Rhodes has no public comment at this time." It baffled many. People online begged her to speak out, to name names, to take legal action, to shame the institution that had humiliated her. "You're too powerful to stay quiet," one influencer posted. "Say something. Do something." But Vanessa remained still. She wasn't staying silent because she was afraid. She was doing it because she was strategic. And when she finally spoke, she didn't use a stage or a microphone. She used a single sentence. It appeared one morning on Quantum Apex's official LinkedIn and Instagram accounts. No hashtag, no filter, no caption. Just one line. "Some things don't need a microphone. They need a mirror." That was it. No follow-up. No comment section enabled. Just that sentence, sitting like a mirror itself, reflecting the world back to its readers. And within minutes, it went viral. Screenshots spread across Twitter. It was reposted by CEOs, DEI officers, educators, and employees at Fortune 500 companies who had seen versions of that same bias play out in their own lives. Within 24 hours, the post had over 4 million impressions and had sparked internal conversations across industries. At some companies, it became a discussion point during HR briefings. At others, it led to urgent DEI roundtables. For many, it was a wake-up call, not because it was loud, but because it wasn't. Vanessa didn't accuse. She didn't name the bank. She didn't point fingers. And in that restraint, her words hit harder than any viral rant ever could. The power of that sentence wasn't just in its elegance, it was in its truth. The world didn't need another microphone amplifying outrage. It needed a mirror showing who we really are when no one is watching. What does it say about us that a CEO could be dismissed so easily? What does it say about institutions that allow these moments to pass unchecked? Her silence, paired with that one sentence, said more than any interview ever could. The message reached far beyond tech or finance. It touched people in medicine, law, education, retail, anywhere professionalism intersects with identity. For Black professionals in particular, it became a rallying cry, because Vanessa had confirmed what many already knew deep down. Success does not shield you from racism. You can be the founder, the expert, the keynote speaker, the most qualified person in the room, and still be treated like you don't belong. That kind of discrimination isn't always loud. It's not always violent. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a scoff, an eye roll, a dropped ID, or a cold dismissal at a teller window. And sometimes those moments cause more harm than the big overt ones, because they don't just insult you, they erase you. They make you question your worth, your progress, and your place. And in Vanessa's case, they didn't just wound her personally, they torched a $2 billion deal. Not because of market shifts or failed negotiations, but because of a quiet act of bias that could have been avoided with 1 ounce of respect. And that's the tragedy. The biggest deals, the biggest dreams, the biggest breakthroughs, they're not always lost in boardrooms. Sometimes they're lost in moments that should have never happened at all. Vanessa didn't need a lawsuit to make her point. She didn't need to shout. She held up a mirror, and the world saw exactly what it looked like. This wasn't just about an ID. It was about dignity. It was about the silent ways people are judged, overlooked, and disrespected, even at the top. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than any press release. If stories like this matter to you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss the truth behind the headlines. We'll see you in the next one.